Hey everybody. So it's late at night and I need to get this video done. So here we go. I miss you, number one. And hopefully I'll be seeing you soon. Before Thanksgiving, I hope. Before Thanksgiving, I pray. Excuse my son who just burst in. Anyway, as you've been doing your assignment on your paper and you've been doing the initial research, hopefully that by this point you're beginning to understand that you don't understand like what the approach is you're supposed to be using. What exactly is it that you're supposed to be searching for, even just finding a basic topic? Because remember, early in the year, and I know we're jumping right back into some material that you haven't even really thought about in a while, but at the beginning of the year we tried to explain the difference between a global issue and a global perspective, right? Or a global topic. And for instance, on the list that you were looking at, global topics, alternatives to oil, climate change, etc. These are huge umbrella topics. And underneath that umbrella topic, there could be literally thousands of global issues. And every one of those global issues could have a multitude of global perspectives. You will need to narrow down and find one global issue that has a couple of distinct global perspectives that you can research and write about. The secret here is to actually formulate an effective question, okay? So what I want to do really quick, and I want you to take some notes on this because I'm gonna have a list that I show you on PowerPoint when you're considering, anyway, when you're considering what topic to write about, and when you're considering how to approach that topic, you need to have a very serious question, as I said. And when you look for that question, you're going to need this list, and I'll refer to it in the future as the list. And when you have a question about the formative question you're writing about, and even in the spring in a group project, I'll say, have you run the question through the list? So it's very important that you take detailed notes about that, because if your questions don't match and don't fit that list, they're probably not a solid academic question. Okay, so let me share my screen really quick. If I can figure out how to do this again. Hang on. There we go. Okay, hopefully you're looking at the PowerPoint now. At least I hope you are. I'll check this video, and if you're not, well, that's going to be frustrating because I'll have to go back and redo this whole thing again, won't I? Let me go ahead and turn off my camera so that you can. Oh, forget it. All right. In academic questioning, when you're writing this paper, when you're creating a formative question, which is essentially the title and the central idea and the central structure through which you will explore your perspectives, it is very important to get the right question. And as you see here on the PowerPoint, a good answer lies in a great question. You can be a fantastic researcher. You can be the world's greatest writer. And you can still struggle in getting passing marks on this paper if you don't have the right question. The right question facilitates the structure that the paper will take. Generally speaking, in academics, there's three basic kinds of questions. There's open-ended questions, closed questions, and then of course simple yes and no questions. And you can see here the examples. Is space exploration a good thing? Open-ended question to be discussed in a number of ways, and closed questions is to what extent should we invest in space exploration? And then lastly, does Mars have a breathable atmosphere? That's a simple yes or no. Obviously, you can't focus on a yes or no question. Even a closed question will be very difficult to write about. Open questions are the direction in which we need to go, okay? But it can't be too big, an open question. Here we go. here over the next couple of slides, I'll get back to it, is the list, okay? Good questions. Good questions invite a global response, okay? Now remember that this is going to be a global perspectives paper. Next spring, we'll deal with some more local issues. We're not there yet, okay? This has to invite a global response. And by a global response, that means it has to be a problem on more than one continent, right? It has to be an issue. They have to be simple and not multiple nested questions, multiple questions in one question. Is it this? And if it is it this? No, you can't do that. You cannot have nested questions. It must require that some kind of judgment be made. Your question must be open-ended. It must invite a global response. It must be simple. And it must require a judgment to be made. And it must lead to a genuine debate. There actually has to be a middle ground. Sometimes students will come up with what they feel to be a great question, but the question pushes to one side. There's no real true middle ground to be held. There has to be an academic middle ground. It has to lead to a genuine debate and invite engagement with alternative perspectives. There has to be legitimate, different alternative perspectives that are possible. It must allow for an answer to be in the middle ground. Only you would really be able to address the next one, I think, but it has to be within your capabilities. Remember, God gifted everyone with different talents, right? And many of you may be immensely witty, or you may have an incredibly high social IQ, and you can read facial cues and kind of know what people are thinking by how they carry themselves, but you may not be necessarily a great writer, and that's okay. Okay, not everyone is a fantastic researcher. Not everyone is a great writer. My job as a facilitator is not to turn you into a world-class academic writer. What we need to do is formulate a question that's within your capabilities, right? It has to be answered within the word or time limit. You can't ask a question that's going to take a 15,000 word exposition. You have to be able to answer this thing in under 2,000 words. That simple. And quite frankly, it must interest you. You're going to spend a lot of time with this topic. And if you choose one because you think it's easy, none of them are easy. But if you choose one because you think it's easy, you're going to be miserable throughout the entire process. Not that you're going to enjoy it necessarily, even if you pick a topic that you are fond of, but it needs to interest you, okay? So let's look at some questions really quickly. Are these good questions? Now, it really stinks that we're not in a live class setting when we're doing this, because we can't discuss each question individually. I can't get your response. But what are the advantages and disadvantages of nuclear power stations? So think about that for a minute. What are the advantages and disadvantages of nuclear power stations? Run it through your list. Does it invite a global response? Sure. Is it simple? Yeah, it's relatively simple. Does it require a judgment to be made? You can tell by my dramatic pause here that I'm wanting you to understand that. Yeah, it doesn't really require judgment to be made, does it? It's just a basic 7th grade style research question. What are the advantages and disadvantages? It's a listing question. It's not really even an open question at all. Is global warming caused by humans, and how can we alleviate the effects? Go back to your list. Does it invite a global response? Sure. Is it simple? No. This is a nested question. It's more than one question in one. Is the world a safer place with nuclear weapons? Is that a good question? Well, let's look at it. Does it invite a global response? Yes. Is it open-ended, by the way? Yes. Is it simple? Very. Does it require judgment to be made? Yes. Does it lead to a genuine debate? Now, see, here's the issue. This question and the way it's structured, you could manipulate this question a little bit and still talk about the same topic. There are those who say that nuclear deterrence, the idea that having nuclear weapons discourages others from using nuclear weapons against you, and so that it can keep you safe as a nation. But the question is not, does having nuclear weapons create a safer, or is it a safer foreign policy? It is the question is the world a safer place with nuclear weapons? And see, there's a logical fallacy built into this, isn't there? Because if there's one nuclear weapon, then the world is inherently less safe, right? So there's no genuine debate to be had. How about the next one? Aid or trade? Aid or trade? It's not really open-ended, is it? Does it invite a global response? Yes. Is it simple? Yes. But it's kind of nested at the same time. By the way, for those of you who don't understand aid versus trade there, it's talking about foreign policy. Is it better to provide aid to those in need, or is it better to foster some type of economic development through trade? Does it lead to a genuine debate? Possibly. Does it invite engagement with alternative perspectives? Sure. Could there be an answer within the middle ground? Probably. If you go back up to the does it require judgment to be made, it kind of does, and it kind of doesn't. It's not really open-ended enough. You could manipulate that question just slightly and probably have a much stronger question. Is cryogenics only an option for the rich as well as immoral use of resources? There's so much wrong with that question. Where do you begin? It pushes to one side. It's biased. There's no true judgment to be made if you're looking at your list. It's a multiple nested question, right? I really need to be pausing more in between these to let you think about it, don't I? Well, I'm not perfect. What are the key policies in trying to tackle overpopulation, and how effective are they? So I'll let you think about that for a moment. What are the key policies in trying to tackle overpopulation, and how effective are they? Right now, somebody say out loud, even though I can't hear you, what the problem is with that. Look at your neighbor and tell them the problem with that. In 3, 2, 1, go. Did anybody do it? No. Okay. It's a nested problem, isn't it? It's a nested problem. So you can see what a bad question looks like. That doesn't necessarily help you, does it, in formulating your question? Just remember that when you formulate your question, it has to be open-ended, and it has to abide by the listing. Let's look at this one. What different attitudes do people around the world have to the relationship between parents and children? It does require judgment to be made, but it's likely to lead to a description more so than an analysis, because it's just talking about different types. There's no, pardon me, it does not require, misspoke, forgive me, it does not require judgment to be made. Anyway, as I was saying, it's likely to lead more of a description rather than a judgment. It would be likely to identify different perspectives, but there's no real debate to be had. It's just informational. You need to stay away from questions that only prompt informational answers, because you'll limit yourself in the amount of marks that you can get, and the question will handicap your ability to just, no matter how good a writer that you may be, it will handicap your ability to actually get passing marks. Let's look at this question. If you changed it just a little bit and changed the idea of it, should young people honor their parents? See, this one does require judgment to be made. It can be treated in a global way. There's a debate to be had. There's only one key idea. It can be answered within a time limit, and to the right learner, it could be quite interesting. Now, is it going to deal with the same type of research that this question would deal with? Absolutely. But just one change in the question opens up the potential for much higher marks. Now, let me put this on pause for a moment and share with you the goal of this paper. The goal of this paper is to actually eventually answer the question through the exploration of two distinct global perspectives on that specific issue. And so you will explore these two perspectives through research, and you'll examine them, and you'll deconstruct them, and you'll talk about them, and you'll weigh them out. And then you'll use that information to actually formulate an answer to the question. This question here, this one, a lot of learners in the past have had a problem with it when I, in the past couple of years, when I use this as an example, because they say, well, it's really a yes and no question. And you're not wrong. It does read like that. It could be worded better, but this is the best question thus far. Could these be better? Let's look at these for a moment. Is nuclear power the best option to solve energy supply problems? You may recognize an issue with this one if you run it through the list. Number one, it's assuming there's an energy supply problem, isn't it? So you'd have to spend a portion of your time actually explaining that, which takes away the ability to answer that within the word limit. It is open-ended. It would be global. You could change that question and still probably do it, but it's most likely too big. Okay, it's too big a topic. You would need to narrow it down for it to be an appropriate question. Have globalization and supranational organizations left the nation state obsolete? Guys, how simple is that question? Not very, is it? Globalization and supranational organizations are two separate ideas on the global stage. One dealing with economies and trade, etc., and one dealing with everything from foreign policy to environmental issues. It's way too big. It's way too big, and it's nested. To what extent is capital punishment ever a justifiable response by the state? There's a couple of problems with this one. Can you recognize any of them? If you're looking at your list right now. Well, number one, it's not open-ended, is it? It's not really open-ended because it's asking to what extent. So that's kind of a closed question. It is also biased in its wording, which means it would be very hard to have a middle ground. Just the simple fact that you say ever a justifiable response. So middle ground and genuine debate would be hard with the wording of that question. Could you still write about that? Yes, we would need a better question. Is voluntary euthanasia ever acceptable? Is voluntary euthanasia ever acceptable? One of the same problems with the earlier question there, ever acceptable. Now, if you just took that one ever out, would that be an appropriate question? Is voluntary euthanasia acceptable? It's a better question, definitely a better question, and would be geared towards higher marks. Now, here's the questions you should ask yourself. Here's another list. Questions you should ask yourself when you're creating your formative question that you are going to address for this paper, okay? Is it relevant? Is it relevant? Is it relevant to what I want to write about? Is it manageable? Is this too big a question for me to answer in less than 2,000 words? Trust me, guys, those of you who put in the research and you follow the process meticulously through the way that I'm going to guide you through it, in the end, the challenge is not going to be coming up with a 2,000 word paper. The challenge is going to be keeping it under 2,000 words. Is it clear and simple? Is it clear and simple? Is the question clear and simple? You don't have to show your IQ in your question, okay? Some of the best questions are the most basic, simple questions. Is it interesting? Only you would really know that. That's why this is a question for you to ask yourself as you're creating the question. Is it interesting to you? Is it within your capabilities? You know yourself, and you know the work you're capable of producing. Is it going to require you to analyze a bunch of data? Is it going to require you to have some base knowledge of physics that you don't have nor will be able to obtain? Is it something that's within your capabilities as a learner? Can you create a doable action plan for it? That to me is very similar to, is it manageable? But is this something that you think you can do? Is it fit for assessment? Is the question actually structured in a way that would facilitate marks? Remember, you have to satisfy the learning outcomes of this course. You have to. And your question has to be open to assessment. So what you need to do is keep referring back to the assessment objectives throughout the process. What I've done is simply copied and pasted from the Cambridge syllabus, which is available on the files, or you can type in ACE Global Perspectives syllabus into Google and it'll pop it up. The assessment objectives, there are 3. Research, analysis, and evaluation is 1. Analyzing arguments, understand how they're structured, analyze perspectives, and understanding the different claims, reasons. We went through these, and I have them all listed here. I'm not going to read them all out. The next is reflection, and then, of course, communication and collaboration. If you think that you have a list of questions that fit the list that we went through earlier, make sure that they would facilitate marking. Make sure that you can actually achieve the objectives that are in your 3 learning objectives listed on your syllabus, okay? That's all I have for the formative questions. You will have to create a formative question. In the assignments that you've been doing, the one that was due on Friday, you know, when you have to create questions. I did put that in assignment, didn't I? If I didn't, should have. You probably struggled with how to word that. Now you have this list. Now you have this to refer back to, and you can apply that to what you have already done. I will list an assignment that I will attach this particular video to, and it's going to be based around formulating formative questions. Got it? Guys, I miss you. I have my treatment on Wednesday of this week. If you believe in prayer, I would appreciate it. I am constantly thinking about you guys, and I greatly miss you, and I can't wait to be back in the classroom. All right. So let me hit stop share. Hey, big screen again. So later, Gators.